Hello Greenstylers, Cynthia here with a sewing tutorial for the Savannah dress. Savannah is a fun and flirty cami-style slim dress with options for a half or full circle skirt. If you'd like to sew along with me to make your bike shorts included in the Savannah pattern, follow along with my Courtside shorts video. Find the link in this video's description. Here are the pieces you'll need to cut to make your Savannah dress. Starting with piece K1, the dress front piece. You can choose between a regular front or FBA as I've chosen here. If you are making the slim dress, you'll have a much longer front piece. Your next piece is going to be the back. You'll either need piece K2, the dress back, or K7, the seamed back, which I've cut here. Again, a longer piece will be needed if you're making the slim dress version. Cut 2C2, the straps piece, as a mirror images. You'll choose between the 3/8 inch wide straps or the 1/2 inch wide straps. Make sure to transfer all of the markings and notches off of your pattern pieces and onto your fabric. Cut 1 of piece C1, the neck binding. Make sure to transfer notches and markings on this piece as well. Finally, piece C3, the center back binding, again marking notches and choosing the same width that you've chosen for the straps and neck binding. If you'd like to add a shelf bra to your dress, cut piece K3, the shelf bra front. Choose the regular or FBA front, which I'm showing here. You'll also need K4, the shelf bra back. If making the slim dress, your skirt will be attached to the bodice. But if you've chosen the half or full circle skirt options, you'll need either piece K5 for the half circle or K6 for the full circle. Cut 2 as mirror images. And if you're making the pockets, make sure to mark the pocket markings onto your skirt pieces. And speaking of optional pockets, to make those pockets, you'll need piece K8. Cut 4 of this piece, 2 sets of mirror images, and make sure to transfer markings onto your fabric. Bring both of your shelf bra pieces over to the table. If you have added the bra cup liner, the openings will be on the front, just right here. Lay your pieces with right sides together and pin along the side seams, just like so. Stitch using a stretch stitch or serger and a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Cut a piece of 1 inch wide elastic according to this chart, which can also be found on page 9 of the tutorial. Since all elastics have different properties and stretch qualities, make sure to check it before you commit to attaching it to your dress. Once you've decided, overlap the ends by a 1/2 inch and stitch with several rows of stitches to secure. I like using a zigzag stitch and stitch back and forth a few times. And now you have a nice loop. Mark the quarter points of the elastic. Mark the center front and center back of your shelf bra and the quarter points near the side seams as well. Align the seam of the elastic with the center back of the shelf bra and then match up the remaining quarter points. Pin or clip in place to the wrong side of the shelf bra. Stitch along the bottom of the elastic using a serger or zigzag or other stretch stitch of your choice. You will need to stretch the elastic a bit when attaching it to the bottom of the shelf bra. Once the elastic is attached, fold it up one time toward the wrong side in order to fully enclose that elastic. Pin in place and then top stitch using a zigzag, twin needle, or cover stitch. I'll be stitching from the wrong side, but mainly because my bobbin thread is a darker gray that matches my shelf bra. You can of course choose to top stitch from the right side, which is what I probably normally would do. If you chose the optional seamed back for better shaping, then you'll need to stitch these two pieces by aligning them with right sides together and matching the notches. Stitch with a stretch stitch or serger and a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Lay your front and back pieces with right sides together and pinning at the side seams. Of course, if you're making the slim dress, you'll be pinning all the way down to the hem. Stitch with a stretch stitch or serger and a 3/8 inch seam allowance. If you're adding the shelf bra, now's the time to attach the shelf bra to the bodice. Turn the bodice with right sides facing out, and turn the shelf bra with wrong sides facing out. You're going to slip the shelf bra inside the bodice so that the wrong side of the shelf bra is facing the wrong side of the bodice. Here you can see that is where I turned my elastic under, and here's the nice smooth edge. You want the smooth edge pointing towards the inside so that that's what's touching your body while you wear the dress. Pin the two pieces together along the top edges. Baste all along the top edges, and once we've done that, these pieces will be treated as one. Use a straight stitch with the longest stitch length and stitch close to the edge. When you get close to the point, stop with your needle down, lift your foot, turn the fabric, and then continue stitching in the opposite direction. Use your fingers to help move the fabric along when there isn't much fabric between the foot and the needle plate. Now grab your neck binding piece labeled C1 and center it onto the front bodice with right sides together. You're going to pin at the center and at both ends. Use a 3/8 inch seam allowance if you're making the 3/8 inch or more narrow straps and binding, or use a 1/2 inch seam allowance like I'm doing to create the wider or 1/2 inch straps or binding. You can use a serger for this step, but I actually recommend using a stretch stitch on your sewing machine, such as the lightning bolt or triple straight stitch. And that's because the serger will cut off part of your seam allowance, and it's best to leave your seam allowance intact when folding over the binding. Now with the seam allowance pressed away from the bodice, fold the binding toward the wrong side. Fold it down so that it just covers up the seam line and pin or clip in place. The single fold in the back is really nice. It's easier and it creates less bulky of a finish, and many knits, especially these athletic knits, will leave a nice clean finish with a raw edge, so you don't have to worry about folding it under like you would with a woven fabric, for example. Top stitch to finish using a zigzag stitch, twin needle, or your cover stitch. Stitch close to the seam for a beautiful finish. And here's how it'll look from the wrong side. You should have a very small amount of fabric below that top stitching line on the back. You can see I stitched very close to my original stitch line there. You can leave it as is, or if you'd like, you can very carefully trim away the excess. Next, we'll stitch our straps to the center back binding with right sides together. Find the circle marks on the straps, and the notch will be closest to those on the end. Those are the notched ends that attach with the center back piece. Stitch using a stretch stitch or serger and a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Now pin this binding to the top of your dress. The notch on the center back binding matches with the center of the back bodice. The seam of the center back binding and strap matches with the seam of the dress, and the circle mark matches up with the edge of the front neckline. The back binding will be stitched and finished in the same manner that we did the neckline, but we'll insert some elastic into the straps to give them some more strength. This is especially important if you want some extra support for your bust. You can use clear elastic or another type of elastic. I'll be using some 1/2 inch wide braided elastic as I'm using the 1/2 inch wide straps. You can use 3/8 inch elastic for the 3/8 inch wide straps. Begin by stitching the elastic to the edge of the strap on the wrong side, and make sure you attach the elastic to the same edge that you'll be attaching the binding to the top of the dress. I'm using a wide zigzag stitch to attach the elastic, and make sure that you do not stretch the elastic as you're attaching it. It will be attached at a 1-to-1 ratio. Cut off the elastic when you get close to the dress. You want the elastic to overlap just past the neckline binding onto the dress. When you're stitching transitions from strap to binding, Switch to a stretch stitch, such as a zigzag or a triple straight stitch, to attach the binding to the dress. And use the seam allowance that corresponds with the width of your binding. So I'll be transitioning to a 1/2 inch seam allowance at this point. You'll be stretching the binding slightly in order to attach it to the dress, but just stretch it just enough so that the dress is flat as you attach the binding. Then, as we approach the other strap, we'll insert our elastic once again, making sure the elastic overlaps the original neckline binding. For the straps, we'll use the same folding motions we do for the binding, folding it up and then around the back one time, pinning in place. As you pin, make sure the raw edge of the binding stays at the back of the strap. That way you won't have to trim off any binding after you top stitch it in place. Once you've completed stitching your binding and straps, you can decide where you want to attach your straps in the back. This is up to your personal preference, but some popular options are to attach them both at the center back and create a V look in the back, or you can cross them over and create a cross strap appearance. And another option is to just have straight straps going straight to the back. However you decide to attach them, just make sure that they're both equidistant from the center back. Now you can try on the dress with the straps pinned in place at your desired location to adjust as needed. Once you're satisfied, you can stitch them into place using a basting stitch. If you're making the straight dress option, try on the dress and confirm that you have good placement, then stitch with a straight stitch back and forth a few times to secure. But if you're making the circle skirt option, wait to secure the straps until after you've tried it on with the circle skirt attached, because the weight of the circle skirt may affect how short you want to make the straps. For the pocket option, make sure that you've marked the circle markings on the skirt as well as the pocket pieces. Match up the circles on the pocket piece with the circles on the skirt, right sides together, and pin in place. Stitch with a straight stitch and a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Next, we'll understitch the pocket by folding the pocket away from the skirt and stitching 1/4 inch away from that seam over the pocket and through the seam allowance. What this will do, will keep the pocket from coming out of the pocket opening, and it'll keep any bubbling like this from happening on the outside of your pocket. You'll have a nice clean hidden pocket in the inseam of your skirt. Once you've completed the pocket stitches for all 4 pockets, we'll bring both skirt pieces to the table and pin them together along the side seam and pocket. Begin stitching at the top of the skirt and stitch down the side seam using a 3/8 inch seam allowance and a stretch stitch or a serger. I'll give you a little note about using the serger in just a moment, but if you're using this sewing machine, you'll stitch down the side seam until you get to the pocket, and then when you see the dot, you're going to stitch about a 1/2 inch up to an inch past the dot. But if you're using your serger, you obviously can't do that. If you're using your serger, just continue around the pocket. With your sewing machine, you'll then back stitch back up to the dot. And the purpose of this little extra stitch is just to give the pocket a little bit more stability so that putting your hand in and out of the pocket, you don't accidentally pull out any stitches. And then turn to head around the pocket using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once you get to the bottom of the pocket, you'll continue rounding that pocket until you get back up to the dot, and then continue for an additional 1/2 inch up to an inch. Use your original 3/8 inch pocket stitch line as a guide, stitching right on top of it. Then with your needle down, lift your foot and turn the skirt so that you can head back down the remainder of the side seam. This is obviously easier to do with the sewing machine, but if you're using your serger, just serge all around the side seam and the pocket, and you can go back afterwards with your sewing machine to add those little 1/2 inch to inch stitches up and down the seam allowance into the pocket. And then you'll end up with the beautiful inseam pocket like this. As you can see, there's no top stitching necessary on the outside of the pocket, but the understitching that you created in the first steps of attaching the pocket can be seen from the inside of the pocket, and that's doing all the work to keep the pocket pieces flat and on the inside of the skirt. To attach the circle skirt, bring over your bodice piece and lay it with right sides out on your table. And with the skirt inside out, slip it over the bodice piece. Align the raw edges and with right sides together, pin the skirt and the bodice in place. Stitch using a stretch stitch or serger and a 3/8 inch seam allowance. If your skirt is very heavy, you may want to add some support to the seam by attaching some clear elastic to the seam. And finally, you can hem the skirt by turning it 1/2 inch toward the wrong side and top stitching in place. congratulations, you have completed your very own Savannah dress. Please be sure to share your makes on social media using hashtag #GSSavannahDress. We can't wait to see your makes. Happy sewing from all of us at Greenstyle.